Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:45 p.m. Directors present tonight are Director Tytler, Director DeFreitas, Director Kuhlenberg, Director After, and myself, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter, Rodrigo. Would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants, and then we can turn on the interpretation function. Okay. The first business in order tonight is approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move that we. I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Do you have a second?
I second. Yeah.
Our next agenda item is our opening celebrations and updates by our superintendent, Dr. Adam Cole.
Good evening. Just a couple of things to celebrate. Want to particularly appreciate our district finance team who's been really hustling. The team has come together to get an on-time audit going. Next week, we welcome the auditors on site. And so tons of learning with the team, lots of teamwork, lots of collaboration, great leadership from Chief Chacoin to prepare for this audit and get a very eager and collaborative finance team ready to go. It'll be a great learning experience for us, and we really look forward to sharing the findings from the audit with the board at our second meeting in December. So looking forward to that work and really celebrating the calendar and the heavy lift of the finance team to get there. Also want to really thank the community for showing up and supporting a number of election-related ballot initiatives. And so just want to update the board on how we're starting to make sense of where those are going. And you know, a lot of these initiatives are aligned to and will strengthen strategic priority number 3, which is student-centered partnerships. So we are eager to support the implementation of 7A, the Early Childhood Education Special Tax District. As the board knows, we've invested significantly in high-quality early childhood education. We're committed to continuous improvement with that, and it's very expensive. So we're really interested in how this special tax district will support our kids, our families, our early childhood staff, and our systems. So looking forward to support the development of the program and the investment in early childhood education programs. Also, we were delighted to see the statewide support for LL and MM, which will help us continue to serve free school breakfast and lunch for all students for years to come. During a difficult year with real threats to food security, this is a win in the state of Colorado. And with that in mind, I just want to share a special shout out to Chef Matty Goodwin and his team at Crystal River Elementary School. The nutritional services team has done a phenomenal job of really supporting student leadership through the student superintendent advisory councils at every high school. The nutritional services team actually caters for all of those meetings that myself and Dr. Park and Joel Hathaway get to have with high school students. And this is the first time CRES, we went to Bridges this week. They don't have a kitchen. So we went to CRES and they just went above and beyond to cater for the Bridges High School students. And so just really want to thank Chef Matty and his team who took on additional work that day. And then, of course, in terms of ballot initiatives, we were delighted to see the community support for CMC, and so are already talking to CMC about some of the investments that they have committed to making through that ballot initiative around work in CTE. And so we look forward to ongoing partnership with CMC. With all these initiatives, we also want to celebrate the Roaring Fork School District Nutritional Services team and early childhood team. We know that folks showed up because of the work those teams do every day that demonstrate that we've got great folks running meaningful programs and are really appreciative of the community's support. Thanks.
Okay. The next business in order is an October count update and financial implications presentation from Dr. Cole, Dr. Park, and Chief Chacoin.
Student count numbers get everybody. So we're going to talk about this from a lot of different lenses. As the board is aware, In October, we have our official count of students, which is sometimes called October count. We wanted to come back to the board, we know is very interested in outcomes of this. We had a preview in early September. We wanted to come back with the actual data. So Dr. Park is going to take us through some of the data, some of what we're tracking and monitoring. Chief Chicoine is going to talk us through some of the predicted and anticipated budgetary impacts of current data. And then I'll wrap us up with some next steps of kind of where we are right now looking at this information.
Great, thank you. This slide just shows an update just monthly. As you know, we've really closely tracked student attendance, and it's one of our priorities for improvement over the past several years, just to get eventually a 96% attendance rate. And our goal for our average daily attendance to date for this year is 92.8. You can see a little bit of month-by-month comparison over the past 3 school years and see the difference in August, September, October. And as a comparison, the end of year average daily attendance for 24-25 was 92.2. So we are very incrementally moving in the right direction. It was 91% back in 22-23. Here we have our student enrollment summary. And we've been closely tracking this just about every 3 days since the first day of school. And so it's this interesting slow oncoming train, as we can see as we're monitoring that. You can see by school, that second column is what they were budgeted for. And if y'all recall, this is based primarily on the demographer's projections. And then you can see the school year actual based on October count, and then the difference in that right column. And what we, in summary, actually I'm going to say this, we can see there's a lot of red. A lot of the schools actually had less students at the end in October count than they were budgeted for. There were a couple of schools that were higher than that, but it's something that Chief Chicoine will also talk about later in terms of impact. We have here the disaggregated student enrollment by both what their overall enrollment is, free and reduced lunch population, gifted and talented SPED. Float is primary home language other than English, NEP and LEP non-English proficient, and limited English proficient. That is something that we also monitor because of ways in which we allocate funding to schools, and then minority population and white population. And you can see the differences, I think, actually in this, between these two. These are the 24-25 numbers. And then the previous slide shows you the 25-26 numbers. In summary here, when we're thinking about comparisons between 24-25 school year and 25-26, like I said and showed, there's an overall enrollment decline, except for 2 of our schools, which had an increase in enrollment. We do have an increase in the documented FRL eligibility, and felt that it's important to say documented because of potentially less forms that were filled in before, but this is just in terms of documentation. And then we can see some schools that had increases, which you can see noted there. We do have some shifts in terms of our demographics. You can see those shifts, especially with Two Rivers, Sopris, and Riverview and GSES. And when you look at the comparisons in our disaggregated student enrollment, you can see just the differences in FRL population, for example, between schools. And then the other thing here, in terms of comparisons, just the total emerging bilingual emerging bilingual student counts, and some of the declines there. And this matters as we think about additional allocations that we make to schools depending on their English learner population. And so that would further have budgetary impacts.
Thank you. Need that. I have one slide. Perfect. So looking at the projected budgetary impacts, so the current state funding formula calculates based upon enrollment averaging for 4 years. It is going to move to 3 years, probably for next year if the governor's
budget goes through, but for right now it's 4 years. So we only see a quarter of the estimated reduction for this year because we still have the students from the prior 3 years. So that's exactly how it averages. And so looking at that, we're estimating a $550,000 decline in our funding for 25-26 at this point in time. However, there is this little note too about the subpopulations. It's a very important footnote because as Chief Parks was saying earlier, is that looking at our FRL numbers, that those numbers going up could have an impact on the amount of money we get per student. So we could see a benefit to that so that we won't hit that $550,000 number. But there's no way for us to know that until we get the numbers from the state in late December, early January. That's when we're going to have that information. So hopefully it'll be a little better than that based upon some of the subpopulation information, but that's the best information I have right now. And we've already talked about the state legislature potentially moving to the 3-year enrollment averaging for 26-27, so that the estimated loss from student count from 25-26 student count reductions is going to be hitting in 26-27, and that'll be even more significant because we're going from 4-year averaging to 3-year averaging. So it tightens up that timeline, increases the amount that we reduce each year. So we're going to see the large majority of the impact next year. Is the basic summary of that. Okay. The other thing I'm going to note that isn't on the slide here too is when TRCS increases and the funding for the other Roaring Fork schools decreases, that then it does have an impact on the enrollment averaging because it's averaging those charters that are going up. So it actually does have a negative impact on that averaging formula for this year. So just another note, that's why it's not exactly apples to apples if you're trying to calculate it out. So just another very important note to just consider. Okay. Okay. So go ahead. You're fine.
So what we are doing in terms of kind of watching these trends, I think the kind of high level takeaway headline here is that we seem to be declining in enrollment faster than the demographer projected. So what we are doing is we're in a position of trying to learn and get curious about this. So we're going to continue to monitor demographic trends, and we're supporting schools who are already running calculations for their 26-27 school budgets and are concerned. We are re-engaging with demographer Shannon Bingham to kind of reconsider this new information and assess the 10-year projections that he gave us last year, given this new information. So we'll share that information with the board when we get it back from Shannon Bingham. We are also doing a deep dive. The board might remember that last year, we wanted to make sure that in a declining enrollment district, we were doing everything reasonably possible to make sure that folks who were not choosing our schools knew what they were not choosing. And so we really focused last year on a small pilot project of investing in some marketing support for Basalt Elementary School heading into kindergarten enrollment. And if you'll notice, Basalt is one of our 2 schools that's actually outperforming projections. So they actually increased enrollment. So we have been working with the marketer who worked with Basalt to really pay attention to what lessons were learned from that, and then look into how we can expand those promising practices across all of our schools as we head into kindergarten enrollment. So that's been really exciting work and feels proactive. We want to make sure again that we're doing everything possible to serve the families that we are able to serve and let them make sure that they know what we have to offer in our schools. So we're doing that work, and then we will continue as we start to hear from Chief Chicoine when we get into some of the quarterly financial reports of the impacts and more detail on how that's going to impact our current budget and what we're going to do about it. So stay tuned for a lot of those pieces. I think we're ready for questions.
Thank you. Director Kuhlenberg?
Sure. I just have a couple of questions about our shifts and if you have any ideas about why they're out of alignment with the demographer's projections. I mean, I see that in 3 of our schools, we have reduced ELL student counts. We have pretty significant decrease in minority students at SES. And so I'm wondering if you think that the shift in kind of our political climate and the state of our country in a broader way is impacting our local schools, because it seems that some of our decreases are focused. Thoughts on that?
You know, what we have to go on is we do collect withdrawal data of family, when the families leave us. And when we've looked at that, and if the board remembers, we did look at some of that data with you all in early September. It seemed, I mean, one of the things that we can name for sure about the demographic study was that it was conducted before the new federal administration came in, which dramatically changed the climate and culture and frankly, enforcement practices around immigration. And we don't know numbers, but we know we are privileged to serve a large percentage of newly immigrated kids and families. We don't collect that data. We don't know that data, but we do know that there are newly immigrated kids and families in our community that, who are absolutely impacted by the shifts in immigration enforcement. When we look at our withdrawal data, though, it paints a very complex picture that, yes, it seems that what we see is that there are a proportion of kids and families leaving out of the country. We can read into that what we want to read into that, but we do see a portion of kids and families reporting to us that they're exiting the country. We also see almost a comparable percentage of families moving to Western Garfield. We see another chunk of families moving to the Front Range and another chunk of families moving out of state. And so I think it's I don't want to make any assumptions too far, but I think it's a complicated set of factors that includes immigration enforcement, rising cost of living, economic opportunities, housing, and those pressures that anyone living in the Valley knows exist.
And then my other question is about the free and reduced lunch eligibility numbers across our schools. There are some pretty large discrepancies between our elementary schools, especially in the Glenwood community. There's one that's significantly higher than the other school. And then also with Riverview being pretty high. And so I'm wondering if there's been thought given to how we allocate student population and why we're seeing a large concentration of students that are free and reduced lunch eligible at one school versus another. And if there's any thought about considering how we're sending kids where, and if we need to adjust that because of staffing and other needs of the students.
Such a great question. And I think we consider socioeconomic, racial, linguistic diversity one of the probably the number one strengths and assets in the Roaring Fork School District. For a small mountain community to be able to serve a diverse set of students is something that a lot of children can't access in small, more or less diverse environments. And it's a key piece of who we are and what we believe in our theory of action of how to prepare kids to thrive in a changing world is that they get to learn with students who are different. So it is very concerning to us to see trends where we might be losing that representative diversity across our schools. Riverview is our newest school, and when it was designed and planned and the boundary lines were changed, whatever that was, 10, 11 years ago, it was intentional to try to maintain that representative balance across our schools, and it looks like we're losing that. I don't know necessarily at this moment how we shift that, how we change that. I mean, I think part of it is telling the story of our great schools and what's happening, and what a gift it is to have students raised in diverse and educated in diverse environments. But it is a concern for us because it's so much of who we are. I will say that we are taking a look at, particularly across our elementary schools, which is really the schools where we focus Title I funding, right? We get Title I funding from the federal government that then is allocated towards schools that serve a higher number of students whose families' income is beneath the federal poverty level. We are starting to look, as some of those discrepancies become wider, at the way we allocate that funding. We want to make sure that it's having an impact and it's meaningful. Some of the statutes around Title I funding require us to make sure that the schools with the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch eligible kids are getting the highest amount of money. And we want to make sure that that's meaningful. So we are working right now to look at some of those allocations, at least on the back end to your question of, are we appropriately resourcing those schools to meet the needs of students? We're taking a look at that this year. But in terms of the upstream work, I don't know that we've quite wrapped our heads around that yet. Anything else to add?
That's all I have. Okay. Director DeFreitas.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could go back to the note about the governor's budget. There is also anticipated to be an increase in funding in the governor's request preliminary, which could be reduced by the loss of funded students. Can you go walk me through that one more time?
Thank you. So the governor's request also included, I believe it was a 4.6% increase in PPR per pupil revenue. So there is a loss that we're estimating from our student enrollment, but then also there's a gain. There's a corresponding gain resulting from the estimated addition that the governor's request included as per pupil revenue. So that's just from the increase from the budget.
And that's just his proposal. That still has to go through the
Correct.
25 legislative or 26 legislative process.
It's got to go through the whole legislative process, and it's just an estimate at this point. I actually was on the call with the Rural Schools Alliance this morning, and Tracy Rainey was talking about them, talking to the budget committee today about those, the joint budget committee, and going through the governor's proposal. So this is very tentative and preliminary. So this isn't something that we can rely on in any way, shape, or form. But it's something, the reason why I put it in there, I also believe it's really important to keep the board and everybody, all the stakeholders apprised of what it looks like right now, so that there's no big surprises out there in funding. Because if we just talk about one part of the funding, the negative part, and then don't really say, hey, there is this potential for additional funding, then we're missing that component, which it could be significant. So
Yeah, I mean, 4.6% per pupil is not insignificant at all.
yeah, I mean, significant meaning that
Well,
that it's in the millions of dollars.
right.
But yeah, I understand that could be still seen as something that is not sufficient.
Never, but I'm interested maybe just to put a bug in staff's ear and board's ear too. If executive branch has already come out with a stated increase, what kind of lobbying work can we be doing, whether with rural schools or other actions with CASB to try and make that happen? So I don't know. I defer to folks who've been, I don't know. I'd be interested in working through that, because if it's out in the open already and the governor's trying to win points by saying he'd like this to happen, let's help him win those points.
Yeah.
My other question is, there's probably no way to answer this specifically, but I know that we brought the demographer on board last year to try to get a more accurate student count. What would we have been looking at if we hadn't brought them on based on our old methods?
So can you repeat that again one more
You know what
time?
I'm asking?
I do.
Like so I've got, we brought this demographer online to get a better view of what the reality was going to be, because that's not how things had previously been done.
So what we used to do is look at moving all students up one grade and then see if we had an estimated percent reduction for the entire district. That's what I've done in the past. And as I've talked with previous CFOs, that's what they've done in the past too. And that's kind of our old methodology of doing this. And then we've got the newer methodology of looking at the demographer's forecast. And I believe that what we really started to do last year is to merge the two. So do two different calculations and then do some real data analysis around those and ask critical questions. And I believe that that's probably where what we're gonna do this year.
I appreciate the thoroughness on that as
Yeah.
well, because it
Yeah.
definitely set us up better for the other variables that we can't control. So that's all I have for now.
Director Tyler?
So just following up on both Director Kuhlenberg and DeFreitas' question, as this demographer is then being rehired and we're taking on this demographer again in data that didn't come to fruition, do we know where the misses were? Do we know what kind of things that they maybe missed on that we're then going to be able, or are we just going to hire again and hope that they do better?
Yeah, I mean, I think where I think we're seeing qualitatively what we hear from our schools is that we have a really set welcoming protocol when a new student enrolls. And if we have a newly immigrated student, there's a range of education and outreach and assessments that we provide for the student and their family through that process. And one of the things we've heard from schools is they haven't used the welcoming protocol in months. And so I think that the piece that was missing was that we have often seen newly arrived, newly immigrated kids and families coming into the district year round, and we have not seen that. And so I do think at a very high level, probably what was missed by the demographer was the change and shift in immigration enforcement and what do I want to say, like the narrative around that for us as a country. I think, our interest in this was to kind of get this back to the demographer to kind of ask the same questions as like, you were right on the trend, but wrong on the, like, you were right on the general direction of the angle, but wrong on the slope. And so to try to get a sense of what his interpretation would be at this point, I don't know that we will need to be using a demographer every year. I don't think, I think it's a good checkpoint and backstop as we try to tighten up our predictions against the reality. But I think right now it feels pretty dynamic in terms of trying to pin down enrollment. I think one of our biggest takeaways is, we thought we were being conservative in establishing 25, 26 numbers. Clearly, we weren't conservative enough. And so I do think it's a conversation that this team needs to talk about. When we've talked about like high level, what should the board be looking at? Where are the things in the budget that you should push on? I think we all know, and what we want to really codify as a team is that, boy, those student enrollment projections really matter. And it is important that the board holds this team accountable for like, where'd you get those numbers? How sure are you? What's the risk? What happens? I think those are things that we're learning that we're going to need to be just have a lot more rigorous interrogation of how we're coming up with those numbers.
The only other thing I would add is, I know it's hard to believe, but we honestly would be in a worse place if we hadn't used the demographer's numbers. This was a really hard conversation to have with leaders in the spring, because we hadn't based allocations on a demographer's projection before. And so this was painful, and we would frankly be in a worse space right now. So
That's good to know. That's good background. Thank you. I also have a question on the disaggregated student enrollment. Can you explain float? And my understanding of float, like if it's primary home language other than English, wouldn't that include all of these NEP and LEP families? And why not? And where are those percentages?
yeah, the primary home language other than English is when there is a language present in the home that is not necessarily the student's first language or primary language. So they may or may not be in program. Sorry, they are not in program NEP, LEP is what I mean, but their parents may speak Spanish to them all day, but then their language that they use would be English.
So
As an example.
So if we were to add up float and NEP, LEP, that should add up to the total number of language programming kids?
No, because it is not included in program. So that total English learners is just from NEP through exit year 2. It does not include any float percentage.
So the NEP, LEP plus whatever those couple percents are the exited year 1, year 2, M1, M2?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Then I also have a question about if you can tell us about the attendance and how it's like flip-flopped a little. And so like, what have we done 2 years ago that was giving us more bang per buck than what we're doing this year? And why are we not able to reach those levels? And I know you sort of said we let off a little bit last year of not making that our focus. So I understand that drop, but what is it that we were doing 2 years ago that allowed better percentages than what's happening this year? Or is it just different group?
I think it's a number of factors, but one thing that we did, like we shared earlier, is to re-up and refresh sort of the attendance plan. And that is something that has helped for sure. You probably remember there's a lot of communication from parents about, what do you mean this is unexcused and what does this mean? And so they're more used to it. I think there are a number of different factors and reasons why students are absent. The other things that we have been working on behind the scenes is really making sure we have accurate data, the ways in which, half day, full day absences are calculated versus period attendance, all that has been really important work to make sure we have the right information. But all in all, our school teams are still doing really intensive work. Our liaisons are doing intensive work to make sure we're addressing the root cause of absences.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for this really illuminating presentation. I if you'll hear me out here, I think the marketing that we need to do for the based on the pilot that sounds like successful or folks were happy with, I think that's great. I also think this is such a big issue and a serious issue that I don't think we market our way out of it, because when we do, we're either going to gain kids from one neighboring district that puts them at a loss, and they're our neighbors. We don't want them to be at a loss. We're going to lose kids to our other neighbor that puts us at a loss. And I just think we're in this perpetual spiral now that we're experiencing on the western edge of our district. That's like an arms race for kids. And these are all Colorado kids. So I think the marketing could be great, but I don't think the marketing is where to make necessarily the biggest investments. And I wonder, and I put a board tracker request in about this. I don't know if you saw it today, but I think the thing that helps this valley and this community is affordable housing. And there are opportunities for the district to potentially really stand up and support affordable housing developments that are outside of our immediate scope. They're not with our dollars, but they could either succeed or fail based on community support or rampant NIMBYism. And I think that is a place we could show strategic leadership that in the long term could give us people in affordable housing units, heads in beds, and then kids in seats in our district. But I think the marketing stuff is great short term, but I do think what you're doing is pulling kids from different parts of the larger community. And I think as we're seeing play out in the media a little bit, it's not necessarily a comfortable place for us to be. So I would just really push us to think through where we can invest our power as a district in terms of talking to communities about approving and not fighting affordable housing. Otherwise, I don't see a solution on these slides.
I really appreciate that, Director After, and I agree wholeheartedly. And when we think of the marketing effort, and it's why I was careful to say, I want us to be doing everything reasonably possible. Because I agree that like the demographic trends for us, we see it for Aspen even more pronounced for us. And then things look very different in Western Garfield. Actually, their projections are very different than our reality. And I think you're right. Like there's no amount, we're not going to market our way out of this. We're not going to reclaim or steal kids that suddenly stabilize us. It's just, we need to read the writing on the wall. It would be really poor leadership from our team if we were to take those demographic trends and say, we're going to invest and we're going to become competitive. We can't make up children. And I agree with you. It's a small pool. I think it's important that we tell our story. I think we need to be proud of our schools and we need to support our schools and we need to make sure people know what they're choosing or not choosing. And so I feel a really sincere responsibility to do that. And to take some support from the district. This is an area the district can add value, that we want our school leaders to focus on leading and being instructional leaders and running great programs. And this is an area that our district comms can support. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I will say, typically our historic practice when it comes to development projects has been to stay incredibly neutral and frankly abstain from a lot of public comments. And I think the board knows because we shared it with you in just an update a couple months ago, the project that is currently being examined by Garfield County, kind of in the Mid-Valley near Riverview. We actually stepped out of our precedent and we sent in comments to that project. I think absolutely in alignment with what you're saying. And we said, look, in terms of things about traffic and utilities, that is outside our scope. We cannot comment. We can comment on the fact that affordable housing for staff matters, and we see this as something that could potentially benefit. And also, having affordable housing so that families with children can live here is something that we're very interested in. And we also have the schools and programs to support the projected plan that's out in front. And so we actually did take a stand on that, which is a little outside of what we've ever done before. And we were very clear saying there are certain things that are not within our purview to weigh in on, but we felt an obligation for exactly what you're naming to be able to say, as the Roaring Fork schools, there are some strengths here. And we would also be delighted to support the kids and families that would potentially be served by this kind of development.
Thanks.
Can I just ask for clarity? So what do we receive Title I funding for?
Title I funding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is tied to the percentage of students whose families' incomes are beneath the federal poverty level. So our free and reduced lunch numbers then directly impact the amount of Title I funding we get from the federal government. And it's also a component that is factored into the total program formula from the state. So those numbers influence both state dollars and federal dollars.
And so I'm just looking at these numbers right now for the student enrollment in comparison to 24-25, and it looks like most of our schools increased more than 2 percentage points. Is that correct? Except for, it looks like one of our elementary schools. And so when we're talking about funding for schools, I'm just wondering, you know, now that we're having conversations about that, what that's going to look like. What are we thinking? Recognizing that this is a huge gap in even growth over a course of 1 year. When we're talking about equitable funding and the future of funding for these schools, what is that? What are we hoping to accomplish with our new thoughts of funding for each school? Because I'm just looking over 1 year. There's some of our schools that went up quite a bit, more than 10%. What is the initial conversations you guys are having about that?
So the only area where, I mean, one thing I want to name is that those increases, again, are really on, we would say, documented, documented free and reduced lunch status, because we believe these students and families have been here all along, but we haven't correctly gotten the data. And so I do just want to pause to share incredible gratitude for the Family Resource Center, for the nutritional services team, for the front office teams who continue to refine and strengthen our outreach and application processes for what we call the educational benefits package. I mean, our comms team did videos this year. We just keep getting better at helping families understand. And I also, given everything we just talked about current climate around immigration and caution, families feeling very guarded about sharing information, I think that data point and increase is a real testament to the trust our families have in us when we say we don't share data, we're not collecting information that has anything to do with immigration status, because what we're seeing in terms of stronger documentation is not what is being seen across the state and the country. So it's a real testament to the relationships we have. The only, I would say, adjustment or equitable funding models we have currently related to free and reduced lunch numbers is the way we allocate Title I funding across elementary schools. And part of this is required by statute, but the schools currently with the highest free and reduced lunch numbers receive additional funding that is then shows up for them in their school budgets as additional full-time equivalent FTE. So our interest, we could do, there's other things we could do with that funding, but we've really invested it in saying we want to give more autonomy to the schools to meet the needs of their kids at those schools through staffing and through whether they decide that's small class sizes or more interventionists. That's up to the school of how they want to use that Title I funding. The way we have currently done it is the schools with higher free and reduced lunch numbers get more money per pupil, but we can set the differential. And so what we have done historically when we allocate Title I funding is ensured that some of that goes to all of our elementary schools. And I think as we continue to see some of these trends and patterns, what we're feeling is that, kind of the federal cutoff for schools that wouldn't qualify for additional funding is any school that's below 40% free and reduced lunch eligible. So even when our schools come in at 35%, 32%, we have still allocated some funding from Title I dollars to them. Not as much as the schools with higher numbers, but some dollars. One of the things we're looking at with school leaders this year is, should we adjust that? And should we really push more of that funding to some of the schools with the higher numbers? Because it is becoming a bigger difference than it used to be. Anything to add on that? And I mean, it's a little bit to be determined, but
In terms of calculation.
in terms of how we would shift it or what that might look like.
And I will say, I think even hearing you, a concern I'm looking at right now is even at the high school level, I'm seeing Bridges, for example, increased more than 12% looks like. And so, you know, if we're gonna really dig into funding and our funding formula for schools, I would say that the conversation also has to include the rest of our schools. Because I mean, I get it, Bridges is a smaller school, you know, it has less students than maybe some of our other schools, but like I'm assuming we have to take into account just really the students that we are receiving funding for that are in those schools. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Park.
No, Bridges is finding it quite differently in terms of it, because it's a small school and there's things that we can't do at scale, but separately, I think that title funding that we get for elementary, if the board recalls, a few months ago, we signed waivers in terms of school-wide programs, and it's just for the elementary. The conversations we are having is, you know, how are we identifying the schools that have the most need, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, and equitably funding and staffing those for sure. We don't have concrete changes right now, but it is a constant question.
I'll just say this. I think it would be important to me as we continue to have our finance committee conversations that we consider that this conversation on our funding formula needs to be moved up, and we need to start really having concrete conversations about this sooner. And like really work to codify a system or something to be put into place, because you know, I don't know that we've always understood. We've had presentations on the funding formula. Some of us have had PD on school funding, and I still think that there are things that as we go through and as we're even going through some of this data that I'm kind of surprised by. And I think we really need to dig into this in the coming year at least. Okay. Each board member directors, we will now have 5 minutes for open discussion. Does anyone have any further comments or questions?
I have one other comment. I appreciate, Director, after your idea of us being a whole community and taking from others, and I agree, like, to say we're taking from others, but I think we also need to look at it from a point of view of we're not going to let ours go away, though. And I think that's different than saying we're making a plan to say, how can we go get RE2's students and bring them here? And I think that's a very different thing than saying we have students who are leaving our district and going elsewhere, and what can we do to make sure they're not leaving our district because we're doing a great job. And so I just want to make sure that we continue to work in that way and look at who our students are and why our students are leaving and what we can do to make sure that they don't.
I appreciate you saying that, Director Teitler. And I would say I want it to be stated very clearly that that it is not one of our strategies to address declining enrollment to pick up kids from other districts. It is not one of our goals. It's not one of our efforts. We're not interested in that. But serving the kids who live within the Roaring Fork School District boundaries, absolutely. Exactly to your point. I want to make sure that those kids and families know what we have to offer and know that we're so eager and ready to support them.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, because I definitely agree. It didn't mean my comment to imply that we shouldn't tell the story of our successful schools and what we're doing to serve the kids in this district. I think there's always going to be some natural flow in and out in the state of Colorado where charter schools are, you know, codified as a right for parents. There's private schools. There's a private school in Aspen that has started parking its bus directly across from my house every day, which is blocking my view, but that's another point. Anyway, I think we definitely, yes, we need to make the case to keep our students. But there are ours to lose if we don't do that. And thank you for the reminder on the work or the comment that was made in support of that development that I can't think of the name of right now. That was Mid-Valley. And I hope we continue to do that and maybe even push on those opportunities a bit more and be a little more aggressive about it.
And I'll just echo the sentiment of, continuing to try to get kindergartners into our schools and trying to make sure that we're getting them, you know, as much as possible to pick us. I think that's going to be really important in the coming months and years. And yeah, you know, I think declining enrollment is real and it's going to hit us regardless. But I also think it's going to be an interesting shift for this entire valley with the new special tax district. So I think marketing is a good idea. Okay, any further comments or questions? For discussion? No? Okay, thank you, team.
Thank
Okay, at this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There's one speaker signed up tonight. The board allots 45 minutes of public comment. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Reminder to all speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask you to be thoughtful and constructive with your comments, and thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may always do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 0 written comments. Our first speaker is Denise Abate.
My name is Denise Abate, and I'm a third grade teacher at GSES. This is my 32nd year as an educator. I'm here to share my concerns about the resolution to advance educational equity for emerging bilingual students in the Roaring Fork School District. Our achievement gap is cause for concern, and I applaud Director Teitler's desire to address this gap as an important systemic issue worthy of discussion, attention, and intentional work from all stakeholders. However, this resolution is far from ready to be codified and implemented. On page 2 of the resolution, it states when dual language programming is not feasible, other forms of bilingual programming should be implemented with the foundation of a translanguaging pedagogy to increase comprehensible input throughout a student's day. Translanguaging is a cognitive process that is individualized for each multilingual learner. Therefore, it is not a systematic, explicit methodology, making it very difficult to have as a cornerstone of instructional practice. Additionally, translanguaging has not been researched at the early elementary levels. As in largely oral-based strategy, in the younger grades, there is little to no research available on its support of students' literacy development. Without a clear understanding of translanguaging, teachers can erroneously use code switching instead, which has little instructional benefit. At GSES, we have been exploring and implementing a biliteracy model for almost 6 years. This has not been an easy process. In fact, 6 years in, most teachers could not do an elevator pitch, highlighting and defining its core practice, its instructional framework, its scope and sequence, or even its intended purpose. The lack of clarity with this program model leads to inconsistent implementation and obscured outcomes. Truthfully, an enormous amount of frustration and hopelessness as an educator. Secondly, biliteracy as we are doing it at GSES is an OR program. Students not yet reading in either English or Spanish at the 3rd grade level receive either English intervention or Spanish intervention. Both scenarios bring with them some very significant challenges. Students in my 3rd grade classroom who cannot yet blend 3 sounds into a word have not received English code intervention, and they've been here since 1st grade. But they're asked to read in English to acquire new language. Since by 3rd grade, students are expected to transition from learning to read to reading to learn. Adding to this challenge is students are getting only a small amount of Spanish literacy and then spending the rest of their day learning in English with English texts. We have created a situation where we simply do not have enough time in our schedule to develop robust literacy skills in either language for multilingual learners. Since we do not have a clear understanding of exit criteria or outcomes, we struggle to know how to close the gaps. It feels like we are creating sink or swim learning environments with limited literacy development in both language, as evidenced by our poor scores on CMAS. Additionally, due to scheduling constraints of this model, we no longer offer explicit ELD instruction for most of our NEP and LEP students. Thirdly, and perhaps most concerning to me as an educator, is this top-down approach that
Denise.
removes,
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna just ask you to wrap that up. Sorry. it's
okay,
been
that
30
removes teacher voice, teacher knowledge, and teacher efficacy. Allowing one or two district administrators with little or no elementary education experience to overhaul educational programs at a school devalues everybody in the building.
Thank you. Okay. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our previous board meeting, and policies KDDA, KHC, and KGA. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we go with the consent agenda as is.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Call for a vote?
Director,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Ramirez,
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Okay, the next business in order. Is discussion on policies AD, AE, AEE, CHCA, CHD, GBEE, JBEE, KFA, and KGB. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We will begin with Director DeFreitas.
Thank you. I made most of my comments during policy committee. And I think the staff has done a good job of incorporating them. Just a flag, the AEE did have some language that was confusing to me. But I think it's been adjusted, and I did some looking up on the recommendations at the state level, and it all makes sense. This is the waiver of state law and regulation. But if staff could just maybe take a second and clarify what that means to the rest of the board members who may just be skimming that, and there's a bit of, it just sounds weird when you read it at first. What is it actually saying?
We have the ability to waive some state laws and regulations that would have to come before the board, any sort of decision like that. Where we typically see waivers come up is in like our charter schools typically have a ton of waivers. Maybe not a ton, but charter schools, it's much more common for them to waive some statutory requirements. And we'll see those as we go through. If you look at some of the appendices in our charter school applications, you'll see the board policies, the state statutes that our charters have waived. As a district, and we actually just spoke about this a little bit ago, the only waiver that our team, as we dug into this, we're like, what have we waived? Was the statewide waiver for Title I funding, actually, school-wide waiver for Title I funding that we brought before the board a couple of months ago that enabled us to allocate some Title I funding to some of the schools that have free and reduced lunch percentages below 40%. Time is everything. Okay. Does that answer your question?
That's helpful. I just was glad to hear the context myself, so I thought it'd be nice if you could share it. Jumping to policy GBEE and skipping down to the use of AI. I think this does a good job and it aligns with other ones that I kind of pulled from other districts. I just think I would maybe want to see one addition about no, so staff may only use AI tools that are approved by district. Staff should carefully evaluate appropriateness. There's a concern around generative AI versus a bunch of other uses, but I think maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. This one does align with what I've seen in other school districts, so I'll stop talking now.
And I want to clarify that it's, we are considering the repeal of policy CHCA, CHD, and GBEEA and KGB for the board. Director Tyler?
Thank you. I do have a question about the repeal policies, and just in the future, I think it would have been helpful for me to like saying, well, they're available in other policies, to be able to have those like policies given to us to say like where they are, because it was hard for me to know that they were in those other policies and to be able to see how they were covered. So that would be helpful. And then I have a question about CHCA and about the handbook, and like if schools have handbooks, and especially whether they need a board approval and whether they should be consistent with other policy and strategic commitment within the district. And I'm just curious to know where that one is specifically about schools handbooks. This, if we're repealing those and saying we don't need that, I'm just curious where that's covered.
Like where the,
Well, it says they're being repealed because they're in other policies, and I'm curious, like, what does it say in another policy about how handbooks that schools are using to show consistency and to show that they're being approved, and where is that covered and how is that being done?
good question. I do not have an immediate answer for you, but we can follow back up with one. By the second read.
And that was just the one that stood out of the ones that we were repealing, but just to know, like, if we're repealing them, more detail on that would be really great.
Kenny, is this about the one, the GBEEA, the social media, or a different one?
I'm sorry, well,
It's on the call. GBEE is being repealed because that language is now in GBEE. So Amy's on there. But I think you may be talking about the other ones.
I'm talking about CHCA. I didn't know where this was coming from, man. We're moving, and I was seeing none.
Remove the pen. I have our room pinned. Thanks.
I don't need that answer now. Maybe in a couple months.
Back from me.
Director After?
Yeah, I don't have any questions on the policies. I did have a question about how we use AI in the classroom. Can I ask that in this context? I'm curious how, given the policy and the linking references and et cetera, I kind of understand what the rules are for students using AI. How are teachers allowed or not allowed to evaluate students using AI? And do we have policies on that? Have you guys thought through it? Like how is AI being used to evaluate our kids?
Do you mean evaluate like giving formative feedback or grades or whether a student could use it or not?
No, I'm talking about evaluating their performance in the classroom. I have a specific example, if it would help, which is I suspect it's being used in elementary school report cards based on how they're written. I'm seeing nods in the back room, so maybe I'm wrong. But that was a question I had, is it being used to create content for report cards? I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just curious.
Not to my knowledge, actually, where I have seen it used in the classroom, for example, is not necessarily whether it's to give formative feedback for kids, but if students are getting started on some kind of ideas and for example, I've seen it in a capstone class, right? Like when you're thinking about the kinds of topics you're interested in, what might they be? And so it just gets kids started versus use generative AI to write your paper.
I know more about how teachers are using it to make teachers. I mean, people use it at work all the time, so that wouldn't be surprising or a shift. But I'm just curious if teachers are using it in the process of evaluating students in any kind of qualitative or written way.
I don't know because I haven't asked teachers that question directly, but I don't think so for elementary report card comments. I also have not read elementary report card comments, so I'm not sure if there's specific ones that you're referring to in terms of it sounds like it. But to my knowledge, it's not a common practice.
Okay.
I would say it wouldn't be unreasonable to imagine, and this isn't necessarily an AI tool, but a digital tool, that when teachers end up writing the same comment 15 times, the thought, it would not surprise me that they have some templates with common comments that are used and just kind of templates of feedback. Yeah, I would say that would not surprise me to hear that in terms of just like time saving process.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I think, am I out of time? Oh. Okay. I think templates make sense. I think report card content that's like your child's shows executive skills. He or she does perseverance really well. It feels like AI to me, or maybe it's just a template so that isn't related to this policy, but it's what made me wonder about how we're using AI in evaluating students.
Got it. I would say it's likely a template, and I only say that because as a teacher writing lots of report card comments, I would do that too sometimes, especially if it's like a particular type, or if it's these 5 or 7 kids are working on a common thing, then I think they can have somewhat similar comments. I do, of course, you have to make sure that the names are correct and the pronouns are correct, for sure.
I don't have any other questions on the policies.
Thanks, team. I did want to just add for the school district mission. Oh, I'm so sorry, Director Klingberg.
I don't have anything anyway. All my questions answered in policy committee. So
anyways, so on policy AD, I did want to just, and I did, share with, Director Kuhlenberg and the superintendent, that, one of the, things that the school district doesn't really have an accountability tool for is the mission. And so I would like to add language, to this policy to ensure that the mission is updated and reviewed as needed in alignment with the strategic plan. I think it's appropriate for us to be doing the visioning process and to be looking into the mission. I think I share that the last time we updated our mission, my siblings were in high school, and my youngest sister is having her 3rd baby right now. So it's been a long time. It's been at least 13 years. And I think it's something that we need to, as a board, be up to date on. And for the team and the superintendent's team, as we're doing our strategic plan and visioning process, be able to also get feedback for this. So I'm sorry I didn't add the language in the policy. I know we talked about it, but it would be helpful to have some language around alignment on that.
If I just check, you're recommending that the language says that it's in alignment with the 5-year strategic plan update. Okay, we'll bring it back to policy committee and work on that.
And specifically review and gather feedback versus change it.
I mean, if it needs to be updated.
Sure, yes, but I think it's 2 different things in a policy, right? To say it's changed in alignment with the strategic plan versus it's reviewed and confirmed that this is still the right mission with a strategic plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think confirmed is the right action.
Okay.
I mean, if we need to add language to say, every 10 years, we should update. I mean, the thing is that I don't know. Maybe we should do some research to see what other schools have done with their mission. I don't know if that is like a set expectation for other schools. I don't believe it is.
I don't think so.
But I do think we need to make sure it's aligned to the strategic plan and to what our goals are. Like there has to be, like I'm thinking of all the kinder parents today, and sure, our mission sounds great, and but would they come up with something different? Probably. And so, yeah, I think my hope is that you guys review and update as needed. to make sure it's in alignment. Okay. Back to my agenda. Okay, directors, we have 5 minutes for open discussion. Does anybody else have any further comments, questions? No? Okay, thank you, team. Oh, never mind. The next business in order is the approval of policy JEB. Do I have a motion to approve policy JEB?
I move that the board approve policy JEB as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we will now have 2 minutes for discussion for each board member. Director Tytler.
Yes, I have a few questions about the entry age requirements. It said in order to support families through this transition, we will permit exemptions. What is the time frame for this transition period? I wasn't able to see that or understand where that is.
It's 1 year. So it's for 26-27, and specifically for families whose child will turn 5 between August 16th and October 1st.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry, just for next year. So they're turning 5 next.
Yeah.
2026.
And then I was confused by the one that went with it, JEBR. And I don't know if we're talking about JEBR right now, but it wasn't like per se on there, but I was confused about the part that talked about exemptions for military families and saying if they transfer in after the kinder year has started, why is that exclusive to military families? Wouldn't that be any family that's transferred in and has started a kindergarten year with their child if they had different cutoff dates from where they came in and then they're come here? We're not going to say, oh, you're too young, even though you started kindergarten, and why is that specific to military families?
There's law with active duty military families and exemptions for entry age cutoff just due to not transient nature, just moving and supporting them. And then the third bullet actually in that regulation does reference families transferring out of state. A student who's at least 5 years old by the district's cutoff may be admitted to first grade. It talks through first grade if they have attended a full year of kindergarten in another state.
Right, but what if they've done half a year of kindergarten from another state and they move here and they want to continue their kindergarten year? How are we going to now tell them you can't do kindergarten this year, even though their child had started kindergarten and now say they have to start their kindergarten over?
I believe the state, in terms of our auditing processes for the state, they are required to complete at least 120 days. But I want to make sure I get the actual right language with you. I've actually talked about it at length with our student records.
So when you're saying they need to have done 120 days, and if they've done 120 days, then they can start first grade. I guess I'm not understanding. I'm saying a family moves in, they started kindergarten, they get here, they think they're going to continue what they've started with their child as kindergarten, and now they get here and are told they can't do kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And I understand that they're saying that's an exemption for military families, but I don't understand why we would say that's an exemption for military families and not other families who are in that same boat.
Yeah, we're trying to, in my conversations with other districts who have earlier cutoffs, and I, ask this question, what are the challenges you experience? What are the certain circumstances in which you do an exemptions or not? We had conversations about going to another district that has a later cutoff for a day or a week or 2 weeks and then coming and saying, well, I've already started kindergarten as one thing. And I don't think that happens all the time, but it is something that the districts I reached out to were mentioned. But that is something that we can also, just take a closer look at in terms of conversations about it. I think the interest here in the early admittance is to be as clear as possible up front, see what happens. And then if we need to make adjustments in terms of the regulation, we can consider that.
So when would that regulation be looked at? Is that something coming up or is this the time that we're looking at it? Or is that on a future agenda?
Well, regulation is not required by the board, but it is something that the board did ask for clarity on. So we're bringing it in terms of there being clarity and guidance in the exceptions, sorry. But it's also this change in date hasn't been something we've executed yet, so I'm sure we will also learn things along the way.
Okay, I would just be curious to hear what other board members think about that as being a military exemption versus anybody moving in exemption as we go around. Thank you.
Correct, Doctor.
Yeah, I didn't think I had questions, but I agree with your questions. And so now I have questions. Or just to double click on what Director Tyler is saying, because we've got exceptions for military families and we have exceptions for families transferring from out of state.
And homeless or foster children.
And homeless or foster, sorry. So if a family from Denver moves here, not associated with a military or a foster or homeless situation, and their kids started kindergarten in Denver, would they be able to start to enroll if they haven't completed a full year of kindergarten? It seems like,
I know.
it seems a little funny, and I didn't pick up on it until Kenny mentioned it. Unless you say that there's like, this wouldn't happen because every other district in the state is on this same timeline.
It's not. And the table that we shared in the memo actually just illustrates that there's a spread from May 1st to October 1st.
So I agree with Director Tyler that families who move to the Valley, we might want to broaden the exception if that doesn't create undue hardship for the district. And that's all.
Okay, Director Kuhlenberg.
I echo that concern, and in policy committee, we pushed a lot and asked for additional information, including like rollout information and communications plans in terms of how this is going to be communicated to families. And I definitely have that concern, and just a general concern that there is limiting it to the 1 year of transition is different than the original 2 years, right? Like we had that 2 year transitory period at first, which I was a little more comfortable with. And then not having some sort of mechanism for enrolling a child who is between August 15th and October 1st, but it's not early access, still catches me because there are so many, like there are always kids that it is a disservice not to send them. And so that's still hard for me. And it is colored by my own experience with my kids, and I have one of each, one that I held, one that I sent, like both September birthdays, and like, but I know how hard that is to put into place and to do, and how much pressure that would put on principals to be the decision makers. But it is still something that is hard for me to square in my own mind with this. And I understand the reasons that we want to push the date up, and totally get it. And the expectations of kindergarten are so much greater than they have been previously. And we're expecting these kids to be able to really engage in real learning at a much higher rate than when kindergarten was like pasting and cutting. So those are my concerns. I am supportive of us transitioning. I think the board should know that neighboring districts are also transitioning. ASD is transitioning to August 1st, starting next year. So.
Director DeFreeze.
Yep, some of the similar concerns. I appreciate Director Tyler's comment. And I want to push on that as well. If a student has engaged in kindergarten in another district and they move here, we got to find a way. We got to find a way to allow them to join if they've experienced kindergarten and their family has planned their finances and their decisions around it. We have to be able to look at that. I think I also found myself in the position that Director Kuhlenberg described, having an August birthday kid who was very ready for school. She would not have made this cutoff. We would have had a really difficult year. I understand UPK is part of a solution financially, but it is certainly not a full solution for most families. And so fortunately, I think this is in regulation. I do want to encourage the district to re-examine that regulation with this kind of those two major concerns, the mid-year transfer, non-military, and then I don't know if there's a way to phrase a regulation around financial. I don't want to say hardships necessarily. For me, it would have been hardships at that time. But yeah, I also want to echo and I hear staff's concern that you don't want to lay this at the feet of every building leader who has to make one-by-one calls. So I still have reservations about this. I did see the communications plan in the board update, and I think that looks good. I think the FAQs are good. I think the press release is important. And then one final thing, I really think if it's at all possible, we need to go back to a 2-year rollout because people have enrolled their 3-year-olds in preschool with the thought that they're counting 1, 2, and then kindergarten. And I don't know where their birthdays are. But those 3-year-olds that are already in there this year, their parents have been considering if they were at the old cutoff that they're going to be in kindergarten in 2 years. So I would strongly encourage going back to that.
I know this is outside the process, but centers have also moved kids through rooms in preschools in anticipation of when they're going to kindergarten. So you're going to be forcing kids to repeat their pre-K year that are already on that path.
With the 2-year rollout.
With
With
the
1 year,
1 year,
yeah.
with the 2-year,
Going back to 2.
there's more lead time as they move through pre-K1 and pre-K2 rooms. But I don't know.
And respond. And respond or not.
Yeah, jump in, please.
No, I was gonna say, I think these are all really valid points and these are all probably parts of the questions why it's taken 7 years to get here. And I think that, in our conversations with directors, with like staff, with people, and we did consider it. And, the original plan was a 2-year, which almost unanimously everyone said, this is so confusing. When we're trying to explain the 1 month at a time rollback and the exceptions for this time. And then with UPK in our conversations with the things working on, early childhood. Trying to explain that actually further complicates UPK eligibility because of the 3-year-old, 4-year-old funding. And I know our other conversation is it August 1st? And then we shift to August 15th to align with the typical beginning of school, and to hopefully ease that in 1 year. And I think you raised really good points. And you're right, when, in our conversations with leaders, it is a lot of burden to say, like, you can make a decision at the building level and building leaders are like, I just need something clean or it's clear. So it's just hard with individual situations. And in conversations I've had with other superintendents around the state who have earlier cutoffs, I've asked them what have their conversations been like and how has that panned out? And they also explain it is hard for sure. And some of them, their cutoffs are so much earlier. I was like, wow, May is very early. June is really early. But I also understand that a transition like this in this transition time is tough to think about. And we're also trying to be in a space where we can have some really clear guidance so that we're not further causing an inequitable situation with families who can potentially know, like, oh, if I just ask, or, then my child can get in early. And we also want to really try not to put that burden on school leaders.
Thanks, team. I don't have any further comments. I think the board has shared their concerns. This is a policy that we are approving tonight, so if anyone has any amendments, I would ask the board. We have 5 minutes for open discussion if anybody wants to add any further conversation to this.
I guess, go ahead.
Can we add some language around at this point around kids who are moving here from in-state?
That's in the regulation, so that can be added at any point in the future. We wouldn't have to decide on that tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable now.
Even so, it feels like the time is now to have that conversation. And I feel like I'd be hard pressed to say yes to this policy at this point without talking about the company regulation and having changes there.
I think we could, I think that what you're advocating for in terms of having an exemption for mid-year transfers that are non-military is not necessarily going to implement the rollout, which is why there's some urgency. So I do think that it is fair for us to, if the board is directing us to take JEB-R back to policy committee to consider this, I think we have time on that. I don't think that that would play in.
Tomorrow.
Right.
now.
So I would say that I think that if there is consensus among the board to revisit JEB-R through policy committee, we could work through that in that context.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's as easy to say exceptions for families transferring from anywhere who've had any kindergarten. And again, this is just based on other conversations I've had with other district leaders on how it's panned out. However, I do agree right now the communication to families is for 26-27 for that time frame, August 16th, October 1st. Family can request to enroll their child in kindergarten, and there's not like a barrier or form, or you don't have to be military or anything like that. That's the exception year right now. And so this is going to be an issue in 27-28 or for 27-28. So I do think it gives us time as a district to understand how is this rolling out? What's the impact? What's the communication? What are we seeing before we make a significant change regarding transfers of families from a different district or the state who have started kindergarten or for any amount of days. Does that help with? And again,
I guess I feel comfortable if we're saying we're going to bring it back to policy committee, then I could be a go. But if we say we're bringing it back to policy committee and we have a time on when that would happen, then I'm good. But without that, I would be a no.
Well, this policy is not coming back to policy committee, but the regulation.
I'm saying the regulation coming to policy committee.
Yeah, but the vote would be on the policy tonight.
That I understand.
Is there space?
But I want to know that it is going to come to policy committee.
And I think that like the language that you're talking about would be, like, I can think of language that would encompass what we're saying that you could put into a regulation. So I don't think that would be an insurmountable task to address it in the regulation. In terms of the 1 year versus 2 years, would there, I don't know, Director DeFreitas, do you support an extension to?
Yeah, I have a lot of strong feelings that 2-year rollout, we have to be able to reach the kids that are 3. The families, everyone's making impossible decisions around childcare. They will not be the ones benefiting from our up and coming early childhood funding. I don't quite know how to do that. I hear very clearly the staff, you guys have spent time identifying all of these difficulties, and the UPK implications are significant. That's not tied to this policy though.
No, and I think it'd be very easy in the language of the policy. In that first sentence of the second paragraph, you would say, we will permit exemptions during school year 26-27 or during the enrollment period for 26-27 and 27-28.
But it'll be covered in the regulation, right?
It would not, no.
No, okay.
It would not be. So early admittance and early access are two different things, and we're talking early admittance during transition period.
I'm looking in
the policy would also have to, I mean, if you guys are gonna add dates, then you would have to update that.
I mean, right now
So
it's vaguely called the transition period.
Yes, I thought that was vague.
I have a question. So I know that other districts are aligning right now. Have you guys had conversations about this being a 1-year rollout?
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that the reality is that if we're gonna stay aligned to what everyone else is doing, then this is gonna depend on the team, making sure that your guys' rollout is incredibly tight and effective. I support us staying on track to what you guys have worked on already. And I think that work has been really important for you guys to, like, you have heard our discussion. You guys know that this is going to be incredibly important for you guys to execute well. And I also think that if you guys need to go to policy committee and talk about this talk about the regulation and come back to the board to give us an update, then I think the board will be able to have further conversation on this topic. I just think right now we're voting on this policy and we need to decide if we're gonna vote.
Yeah, I mean, we can make intervening motions to amend it though.
Yeah, so
If the board wanted to amend it.
So that was
I mean,
like-
it could also be approved tonight and then we could bring it back to policy committee and update it
Yeah,
at the next two meetings. Like, there are options to get us all to a place where we're comfortable, I think. And so I don't want us to feel constrained by time. Like, I think we can approve it and you guys can move on what you need to move on, and we can also then bring it right back and continue to discuss it and refine it without changing the ultimate cutoff date. I think there's agreement from the board on having an August 15th cutoff date. I think it's these like nuances that need to be worked out. And so I don't think it's like a either or. Like, I think we can get there.
For our local community partners, it felt very important that whatever the decision is, that they can communicate what it is as quickly as possible, which I agree with. And what I'm hearing you say, Director Kuhlenberg, is not necessarily I'm just trying to think. I don't want to further confuse people because you're right that the communication, everything is really tight. We're trying to make sure our FAQs are tight, our flyers, our press releases, everything. And so part of that language does include for 26, 27, if your child turns 5 between, August 16 and October 1st, then there's an exception here. Right. And some of the language does include for 26, 27. It doesn't say, and I guess this is a question, do we say future years are TBD, but I don't want it, we're trying to have as little uncertainty as possible while understanding and I think there's a difference between future exceptions may be considered.
Yeah. And I think from that perspective, it's like under promise, over perform, right? Like, if we're saying, okay, for next year, they can be grandfathered in, and then the board in a month and a half decides, well, the following year they can too, then that's just going to make people happy. It's not going to, I don't think anybody's going to be unhappy about that. So I don't think that there's necessarily a drawback to keeping communications as they are. And then if it is extended, being able to communicate out that.
I don't know. I would still say 2-year rollout for the 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just think it's hard for those kids that are already in that trajectory and moving through the systems in these schools. There's already an exit date in mind. And that's, I think, a tough pivot for people. I agree with Director DeFreitas. So.
And I just want to clarify that we'd probably not call it a 2-year rollout, but I would say 2 years of allowing grandfathering in.
Thank you. That's
Right.
good.
That's kind of what you're proposing. Yeah.
Your grandfather
We're
period.
trying not to use grandfathering because we think so.
Yeah.
Where do you put the language?
Grandpersoning.
Years. What's that?
Nothing.
Yeah. Just like a 2-year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so does that language need to be in this policy, or is there an intervening motion to amend?
I don't think it goes in this policy. I think it's in the regulation.
But in the policy where it says we will permit exemptions only during the transition period, that transition period could be where the wording can change.
Could be defined as.
I mean,
the
I would still
27.
propose what I said. I propose that we approve it as is, that we bring this back to policy committee on December, whatever it is. Next time we have policy committee, first, second, third, and then we align on language, and then we bring this right back for an update. It would take 2 reads to get that done. It would be done in January.
Right. Feedback from the board in the last meeting was not to include, there used to be specific years and language here, and feedback was to remove that
Yeah.
and put it in regulation.
Maybe it's cut, and this is, again, I think a conversation we have in policy committee. Maybe that whole paragraph is cut and it's just included in the regulation.
And if we're bringing
'Cause I
it
don't think
back,
that serves a purpose beyond this year.
and if we're bringing it back to policy committee, can we talk about the regulation there too at that same time about the out of state moving in?
So then why shouldn't we just table this then instead of bringing it?
They need to be able to act. There's time. They really.
Yeah.
kind of
No, we need to
butt
vote on it now.
against.
I think if there's an intervening motion to pull paragraph 2 over to the regulation, we could approve the policy without that. Our team can move forward knowing that we will, yes, permit exemptions during the 26-27 school year, and that policy committee will have further conversation about the regulation and extending that exemption period to 27-28, and also looking at mid-year transfers. And that those would be cleaned up in regulation. They don't require 2 reads. So if we have clarity and agreement from policy committee, it's as simple as we've adjusted it. This is where we are. Here's the update.
Yes.
Sound right?
I make a motion that paragraph 2 be pulled into regulation.
Have a second.
I second.
Okay. We ready to cover a vote?
Hi.
Director DeFreitas?
And we're voting on the amended policy.
Yes.
We're voting on the intervening motion to amend. Yes.
Yes.
I think we need to make a new motion to amend the policy JEB as amended for Director Tyler's intervening motion.
I second.
Now, call the vote.
Director Hefter?
Hi.
Director DeFreitas?
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg?
Aye.
Director Ramirez?
Aye.
Director Tyler?
Aye.
Thank you, team. Okay. The next business in order is the approval of 3 new district accountability members. Do I have a motion to approve the 3 new district accountability members?
I move that the board approve the 3 new, I move that the board approve the 3 new district accountability committee DAC members as presented.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Director Commissions. Thus.
Perfect.
Hi.
Hi, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to say anything. I love that we're moving forward with the vote. I did, I do want to tell you all a little bit about our bylaws because we're going to have another vote coming up probably in your next board meeting as well. We're currently very active in growing the DAC. And so I just want to give you a baseline of where we're at and let you know sort of where we're moving forward, if that's okay.
Yeah. That's
So currently we have 4 voted in members on the DAC, 3 parent members and 1 community member or resident of the district who is not a parent with a child in the district. And that is according to our bylaws. Tonight, our goal is to vote in 1 teacher, 1 business member, community business member of the district, and who does not have a child within the district, and 1 parent, 1 additional parent who has a parent at a different school than we're already in. Sorry, that's a little bit confusing, but I would love to just let you know that the goal this year is to have 12 DAC members. DAC must have no more than 15 members, and all members of the DAC will be voting members. So we are actively growing. The pieces that we're missing, the members that we're missing to sort of meet the establishment and composition are a administrator and a parent of a charter school. So we're actively recruiting there, but in the meantime, we're still working to just grow the DAC membership so that we can have more people involved. Are there any questions about that?
Thank you so much, Bridget, for being here tonight. We'll have 2-minute discussion for each board member, although I'm not sure if we're going to take up all our time, but I'll go ahead and give everybody the opportunity to ask questions if needed. We will start with, where did I finish? Director After.
Great. Thanks. And thanks, Bridget, for being here. I don't have any questions. Just comment to say thanks for all you and the team on the DAC are doing to raise the profile of the DAC and actively recruit members. It's great to see another 3 signed up since the last meeting. I know there's a meeting this week. So thank you. And I don't have any questions about these members, and I'm excited to have a chance to work with them as the board rep on the DAC.
Thank you.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Yeah, just echo the thanks and the gratitude for all you guys are doing to build out the DAC. My only comment about the additional membership would be that as you grow, I hope that you'll keep in mind the general ratios of minimum DAC membership and align those to your larger membership so that we don't have outsized like community participation that doesn't have children in our schools or 9 parents and 1 teacher. Like, I just hope that we can keep the ratios somewhat similar because I noticed we are approving a 2nd community member with no children in schools. So, and that's one of those categories where it's 1 in the CDE regs. So that's my only comment, but thank you.
The only thing that I would quickly say about that, there is a clarification there for our DAC members. Oh, let me pull up the right screen. They are each meeting a different role. So there's 1 person who's involved in a business or industry in the community within the DAC boundaries, and that role is being filled, that we hope to be filled tonight by Steve, and I forget how to say his last name, Fautier. Foshian, and the role of a person, at least one resident of the DAC who is not a parent with a child in the district, is a separate role.
Is that from your bylaws or from the regs?
That is from our bylaws.
Okay, so those differ than the regs.
Okay.
Director DeFreitas.
I don't have additional questions. Thank you so much for your time and for the work that you're doing to bring this together.
Director Tyler.
So building up the DAC and getting more membership, I guess my question is, how are we doing as a DAC of trying to match demographics of our district and trying to have representation from all of the members of our community? And I'm just specifically questioning how are we doing with Latino representation and what is being done to bolster that?
Yes, we are currently lacking in our Latino population. And it's an area where we are actively outreaching. We've sent some direct communication inviting folks to be on the DAC at charter schools and at other schools. But it is an area where we're falling short at the moment.
Representation at the moment of Latino families?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. We do not have representation at the moment from Latino families.
Thank you.
I'll just echo the gratitude. Thanks so much for being here tonight and for making sure, we were able to follow up on that conversation about your bylaws. And I think it's, the board just has so much gratitude for all of the volunteers who give their time to help not only support the DAC, but want to volunteer and be in it. And I really appreciated your leadership in making sure that we're working and staying focused to get new members. So thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you.
Are there any intervening motions to amend, or does anyone have any further discussion? No? Okay, we can call for a vote.
Director?
Aye.
Director DeFreitas?
Aye.
Director Kronberg?
Aye.
Director Ramirez?
Aye.
Director Tyler?
Aye.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget.
Okay, the next business in order is the approval of a board resolution honoring Native American Heritage Month. Do I have a motion to approve the board resolution honoring Native American Heritage Month?
I move that the board approve the resolution honoring Native American Heritage Month as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
We will now have a 2-minute discussion for each board member. Director Kuhlenberg?
I'm grateful that we're doing this. As I always say, it's a small token, but I think that it is important that we continually recognize these months and highlight their importance in our communities and in our schools. But I don't have anything specific. Thank you.
Director DeFreitas?
Yep, I'd like to echo Director Kuhlenberg's perspective. I appreciate this being brought forward. Thank you, Chair, for the time you took.
Director Tyler?
I also approve of this, and I like the fact that we're celebrating diverse cultures and that we're taking time to raise awareness and be able to bring up historical injustices that have happened in the past and recognizing that, and especially considering we live in a land where the Ute tribe lived and we're on their land.
Director, after?
Thanks. I don't have any comments on this. Thank you for putting it together.
And I'll just give gratitude to Jonathan for all of his work in making sure that not only are we abiding by our resolutions on a monthly basis, but also for making sure that this was on our agenda and all of the work he put in to follow up on this. 5 minutes for open discussion. Do any board members have further comments? Okay. You can please call for a vote.
Director?
Aye.
Director DeFreitas?
Aye.
Director Kronberg?
Aye.
Director Ramirez?
Aye.
Director Tyler?
Aye.
Director, after, do you mind reading it?
Sure. 1 second. Okay. Board of Education resolution honoring Native American Heritage Month. Whereas the month of November is nationally recognized as Native American Heritage Month to celebrate the many unique Native American tribal nations which originally inhabited the lands now known as the United States, each with their own diverse culture, history, religion, traditions, governance, and peoples. And whereas the peoples of these diverse indigenous cultures have been subjected to generations of cruelty, violence, and intimidation, including the forced removal of Native peoples from their homes and ancestral homelands, attempts to assimilate entire generations, and stripping of indigenous peoples of their identities, cultures, and traditions, actions which perpetuated trauma and turmoil, which has fundamentally altered their communities. And whereas the entire Roaring Fork School District falls within the original unceded homelands of the Ute tribes, and whereas in educating the children of the Roaring Forks in the Roaring Fork schools, it is appropriate that all children not only learn about, reflect upon, and cherish the many contributions that Native Americans have made to our society in American government, law, public service, business, agriculture, commerce, education, the arts, science, and sports, but also understand the truth of their persistence and survival. And now, therefore be it resolved that the Roaring Fork School District Governing Board acknowledges RFSD schools and properties are located in the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ute people who are the original inhabitants of the Roaring Fork Valley. And furthermore, be it resolved that the Roaring Fork School District Governing Board hereby authorizes and encourages staff to plan and develop ways that we can teach our children and our community about the lives and accomplishments of local Indigenous people and the many sovereign tribal nations which flourish today and are working to strengthen the fabric of our own country. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Roaring Fork School Board of Directors do hereby proclaim November to be Native American Heritage Month in the Roaring Fork schools and strongly encourage our staff and community to observe, recognize, and celebrate the culture, heritage, and contributions of Native Americans to our country, our state, our community, and our schools.
Thank you. Okay. The next business in order is approval of a board resolution.
Call to vote.
Oh, did
We
we
did.
not?
We just voted.
You did that,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry.
The next business in order is the approval of a board resolution for culturally and linguistically diverse education. Do I have a motion to approve the board resolution for culturally and linguistic diverse education?
I move that the board approve the board resolution for culturally and linguistically diverse education as presented.
Do I have a second?
My second.
We will now have 2-minute discussion for each board member and 5 minutes of open discussion. Director Tytler. So we can start us off.
I would like to ask if I could extend my 2 minutes and maybe go up to 5 minutes.
Yes.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who played a part in allowing this resolution to come to fruition. I especially want to thank the board for all the time that we had working together. I would like to thank the staff and the support that we got from Dr. Cole, from her staff in getting us and moving us forward. It took a lot of different discussions, a lot of different looks at what it would look like in getting to this point. But I especially want to talk about how this resolution is based on the fact that the Roaring Fork schools will ensure that every student develops the enduring knowledge, skills, and character to thrive in a changing world. And part of this resolution talks about increasing comprehensible input and making sure that students are able to engage in their studies in a way that it will allow them to progress. When we look at what comprehensible input is and where that plays the big role is especially at kindergarten and first grade areas. And when we look at the disaggregated student enrollment that we got presented today, that in our elementary schools, we're ranging up into the 50% of children who are students who are NEP or LAP. So they're coming in to school, not speaking English, starting their schooling. They're coming from families who have less parents who, as a whole, have attended less school. There are students as a whole who are coming in with millions of less words spoken to them and asking them to be able to engage in a conversation when the learning target is not matching their needs for their language levels as they're coming in. It's very important that we have this increase in conversation and comprehensible input for students to be able to engage in their conversation. When we look at students, we're wanting to make sure that they are able to either be having a language target or a academic target that meets their needs. And by stating that as a district, that dual language bilingual education is best practice, and that if that is not available, then we will be trying to give them native language literacy, and upon doing that, making sure, as we were brought up in conversation, of using translanguaging strategies, but it's more than just using this translanguaging strategy, is making sure that what they're getting is at their need. And so if they're in kindergarten and first grade, by giving them native language literacy, we know that they're going to be able to academically advance at the same time as they're learning English. And so that over time, all studies show it's 5 to 7 years before there's competency in their second language. And so being able to allow them to progress academically at the same time that they are progressing in their language ability is going to allow them to get to a point where they're going to be fluent in both languages and already have the academic skills necessary. And so I think a perfect example is what is happening up at Basalt Elementary, where dual language programming has been happening for many years and has been done. The students who just were in fourth grade this past year, who we just got data on, are the first group of students that have gone through since first grade. Starting this year's fourth graders are going to be ones who started in kindergarten, or am I off? In kindergarten. So those COVID. So those fourth graders were the first group that started in kindergarten. And if we look at the results from Basalt of our Latino children, if you look at their scale score in English language arts, their scale score is at a 742, which puts them at the meets expectations as a group for Latino students. When we look at all of our other elementary schools combined, their average is 712, which puts them in the does not meet. And so when we're looking at that type of data, when we're looking at the fact that students exiting language services at the Basalt Middle School is 62% of children have exited services. When we look at the rest of the district, 46% have exited services. That it's showing that this is what comprehensible input is, that they, during their time, have been able to achieve academically. Their language skills are catching up to them. And the last thing I would like to include is, this is a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but we're here to honor the fact that these students have a way to move forward with their learning. And we're not saying that this happens tomorrow and that we need all schools to jump on tomorrow. We need to take into account timelines, challenges, implementations, staffing, involving the schools in the process to make sure they're on board, and not be what we're hearing is top down. We're not saying how it needs to be done. We're not saying the way it needs to be done. We're just saying we need you involved. And if your schools are not meeting the needs of where the students are, then we need to make some changes to get to there. And so I just would like to say thank you to the people and the systems that have allowed this to pass forward to this time.
Director After.
Great. Thanks to the Board of Education members, especially Director Tyler, for the work that into putting this resolution together. And thanks to Dr. Cole, Dr. Park, and Amy Fairbanks, among others, for your leadership here. So in the month since the resolution's been available, we've received feedback on it, both positive and constructive. And I'm really thankful to the community, especially CLD coaches and teachers, for making your voices heard over the past few weeks. We heard from people who said that it did not go far enough, that it lacks teeth. And we also heard from people who said it's too much, too fast. I don't think anyone here thinks this resolution is absolutely perfect, but I strongly believe that we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good, and that this is good progress. My feeling here is that this is a first step and not more or less than that. It's meaningful that this is coming in the form of a resolution and not a top-down policy. It's a declaration of a value that describes a clear vision for the students who are on various parts of their language development journey. I also want to share with the community that the discussion around CLDE has led us to important conversations about literacy overall in elementary schools, and that's an important and good outcome of this process. And then my last point here is that to a T, everyone who's sitting up here tonight was elected in what can be called landslides, with campaigns focused on closing the achievement gap. And so this board felt urgency to do what we can because it's what we were elected to do. And this is one step in the direction. It's by no means the only step we need to take to close the achievement gap. It is just one, but one very important step.
Thank you, Director Kuhlenberg.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Tyler, for pushing this work forward. Thank you, Superintendent Cole, and all of your staff for all of the time and energy that was put into this. And I just want to echo a lot of what Director Apter just hit most of the points that I wanted to make on the head very eloquently. So I don't think that I need to rehash them, but in saying that I support this, this is a resolution. The board has different levers that they can pull and ways that they can exercise power. But ultimately it's the board's job to set the direction, and it is then incumbent upon the superintendent and staff to ensure that the rollout of this is done in a way that is successful. And that includes involving staff, teachers, building leaders, all of those people who need to be involved and engaged. And I'm fully confident that that will happen. So I'm proud that the board is taking this step. I think that moving is better than stasis. And I think that we are seeing the results of high quality dual language programming, and those results are resoundingly clear in a lot of ways. And we need to figure out how to replicate that, because it's not okay that some of our students are getting that and others are not. So I support this, and thank you, Director Tyler, for not letting it die and for sticking with it.
Director DeFreitas.
I can't add much to my colleagues' perceptions, eloquent descriptions, but just want to emphasize the urgency and the appreciation I have for the determination of Director Tyler pushing through various obstacles to bring this forward. And I do want to recognize the concern of staff and educators who look at this as just, it is, it's another thing, and there's a lot going on. There's a daily list of requirements and procedures and necessary steps, communications, and just being emotionally and physically present for small, needy beings. And there is a very real recognition of that burden here on the board, which is why this has sort of had to strike a balance between, just like other directors said, being too much and too little. Setting a direction, but making sure that the steps will include, and I'm reading here, take into account community engagement and support, clear outcomes, instructional expertise and capacity, curricular resources, human resources, professional development, and sustainability in the development of implementation plans that adhere to this. It is not policy, and we are trusting our staff, because staff at the district and leadership at the district continually proves themselves to be able to meet incredibly high marks. And I really do hope that the community maintains an open channel with us. However, we are serving this school district and the people within it and the students within it. And so this question, or this acceptance of a resolution, is so important, but it's not the final word, and it's not a closed door on communication with the people who are in, the trenches day to day with implementation. So we look forward to that continued outreach and perspective, and encourage it. So that's all I have to add.
Thank you. I will echo the sentiment of the board of gratitude for Director Tyler in leading this charge and this conversation for the board to not only uplift it with the team, but to make sure that we had a resolution before your departure. I want to also highlight, the board's commitment to not only being open to feedback and criticism and constructive feedback and all of the work. I think, we welcome it. It's really important for the board that we, as much as possible, hear from the boots on the ground, from our teachers, from our staff. There's obviously things that we recognize as a board that are missing from this resolution. And there is a commitment from this board to continue to do the work and to continue to have these conversations. One thing I will note is, there was a call for the evaluation of the CLDE department. And I think that was something that we as a team, in further conversations, I think in the coming future, is something that Director Tyler uplifted and brought a lot of things to the boards and our team's purview. And I think we're going to continue to uplift that. So we want to encourage community, teachers, staff, especially those who are working in our district, who are working hands-on with these programs, to please continue to reach out to us, to continue to let us know what we need to do better. And we also want to commit to our students and to our families that we want something to shift. And this was, I think, a lot of work, a lot of commitment, a lot of conversation. And I really appreciate that the board has really worked through some of those conversations to come to this resolution today. And we know that the work continues. Okay, we have 5 minutes for open discussion if anyone would like to add further comments. Okay. You call for a vote.
Doctor,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Director Tyler, if you'll do us the honor of reading it.
Resolution to advance educational equity for emerging bilingual students in the Roaring Fork School District. Whereas the Roaring Fork School District serves a diverse population of around 5,400 students, of which approximately 50% are considered bilingual thinkers and 25 to 30% of students are emergent bilingual students, actively receiving culturally and linguistically diverse educational programming. Bilingual thinkers include students ranging from non-English proficient to students who have primary home language other than English, but may consider English as their primary language. And whereas despite consistently strong WIDA access English language proficiency growth scores from the emergent bilingual learners and low long-term English language learner percentages year to year, disparities still exist between multilingual learners, emergent bilingual students, and native English-speaking students on CMAS, PSAT, SAT growth, and achievement data when we examine the achievement data of all language students as one group. And whereas academic standardized tests with inherent cultural and linguistic biases prohibit meaningful access to the exam by emergent bilingual students classified as NEP, no English proficiency, and LEP, limited English proficiency, and can lead to an incomplete understanding of students' abilities and the effectiveness of the program that served them. And whereas extensive research in the fields of linguistics, cognitive science, and education demonstrates that dual language education, defined as programming where language majority and language minority students are in heterogeneously mixed classes for all content areas and are taught in 2 languages, is the most effective educational model for emergent bilingual students when conditions are appropriate. And whereas studies consistently show that students in dual language educational programs achieve higher long-term academic success on national normed assessments. Therefore, be it resolved that the board affirm dual language education as a research-based best practice for educating multilingual learners, including our large population of emergent bilingual students, multilingual learners, and commit to its support and expansion in our schools. And therefore be resolved that the board supports the strategic use of the student's full linguistic repertoire, noting that when dual language programming is not feasible, other forms of bilingual programming should be implemented along with a foundation of translanguaging pedagogy to increase comprehensible input throughout the student's day. Schools should make every effort to provide Spanish literacy programming for native Spanish-speaking students when dual language programming is not feasible. And be it further resolved that the district will identify in this annual CLDE program review the most appropriate CLDE programming for each school using disaggregated academic achievement data by language status for appropriate interpretation of results. These include WIDA access median growth percentiles, the common components for high quality CLDE programming and instruction, CMAS, PSAT, and PSAT scores of emergent bilingual students in the CLDE program review that align with Supreme Court law. Be it further resolved that as part of the annual CLDE program review process, schools that are not currently delivering the appropriate CLDE programming or taking steps to approve the selected model will develop and submit concrete plans to the Board of Education. These plans, linked to the CLDE program review school summaries, will include timelines, action steps, analyses of challenges and opportunities, SMARTY goals, and estimated budgets that detail the steps necessary to implement appropriate CLDE programs at the schools. These analyses must take into account community engagement and support, clear outcome, instructional expertise and capacity, curricular resources, human resources, professional development, and sustainability in the development of an implementation plan.
Thank you. The next business in order is the approval of a board resolution honoring Director Kenny Tyler. Do I have a motion to approve the board resolution honoring Director Kenny Tyler?
I move that we approve the board resolution honoring Director Kenny Tyler.
Do I have a second?
Jinx.
We will now have 2-minute discussions for each board member and 5 minutes for open discussion. Director Kuhlenberg.
Oh, man. Mr. Kenny, I'm going to miss you terribly. I'm going to get sad that you're leaving. We came into this together and it's been crazy 4 years, but I'm happy that you're getting to move on and enjoy time with your family. And I'll always be grateful from the lessons that I learned and the conversations that you've had with me and the help that you've given me. And the love, respect, and care that you've shown, not just for all of students in the Roaring Brook School District, but for my own kids too. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Director DeFreitas.
This is the third place that you've had to put up with me professionally. I'm sorry. Mr. Kenny put up with me as a brand new teacher, offered some very patient and well-scoped perspective on how to deal with my very diverse classroom in the first few years. I think your ability to see what someone needs in that moment and what they're ready to accept and understand, and you deliver that information with such intuitive ability to reach the heart of the matter. And it's so funny because I remember you offered some gentle suggestions, and looking back on like what my original classroom looked like, I just cringe. You invited me to come along with you teaching with adult learners, which was an incredible experience for me with CMC. I appreciated the trust you put in me with that class, and I learned a tremendous amount engaging with those incredible individuals. And then stumbling onto you here on the board again and again, feeling those gentle pushes at the right time and in the right amount. And that is an incredible skill. And I know that I'm not the only one in the community that has grown directly because of it.
Thank you.
Director.
I have probably known you the least amount of time as everyone up here, but I knew of you before joining the board with you, and you have always been so gracious and generous with me, explaining the world of education and everything I didn't know. And I saw it again tonight with how you interacted with our soon-to-be board member, Tammy, in our work session, just stopping to make sure she understood where we were in the conversation. And I think that speaks to your innate desire to make sure everyone is brought along. And this resolution tonight is part of that. I think it's emblematic of your approach to human relationships and to the care that you give to the community. So thank you for all the learning and the time, so much time.
Thank you.
Señora Taylor, muchas gracias por su dedicación todos estos años en todo lo que usted hace con los estudiantes del distrito escolar. Ha hecho un gran trabajo y se merece todas las felicitaciones del mundo para disfrutar todo el trabajo que usted ha hecho para los estudiantes del Roaring Brook School District. Muchas gracias por ser alguien que ha trabajado tan duro para la comunidad.
Gracias.
Director Coomber, if you don't mind reading the resolution. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Call for a vote.
Director Apter,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Ramirez, Director Zeitler.
Okay.
We had to make the margins non-existent for you, Kenny.
Oh, wow.
It's true. Resolution honoring Kenny Tytler for 3 decades of service to the students of the Roaring Fork Valley. Whereas Kenny Tytler has dedicated his career to serving Roaring Fork School students as a classroom teacher, substitute teacher, college educator, tutor, volunteer, and mentor, and has dedicated thousands of hours to improving schools, including being instrumental in establishing the district's first biliteracy programming. Consistently bringing humility, preparation, and student-centered advocacy, especially for newly arrived and immigrant students, to every meeting, school visit, and community conversation. Vice President Betsy After shared, "I'm grateful to have worked with and learned from Kenny. His attention to detail, meticulous preparation, and insistence on progress, even when it is uncomfortable, kept student outcomes front and center." Whereas since 2021, Kenny has served on the Board of Education representing District A, and during that time served as the board representative in interest-based bargaining with certified staff and to Colorado River BOCES, and contributed to committees including Housing and Finance. Board Director Lindsay DeFreitas shared, "Kenny Tytler is just Mr. Kenny to most of the community, a title bestowed on him by the hundreds of students and parents who know him parents who know that he is a listening ear, a gentle teacher, and a strong advocate. I've been lucky enough to spend time working with him in all of those capacities, and I'm so grateful for what I have learned along the way." And whereas during his board service, Kenny has been a steady and essential voice for English language learners and immigrant students and families, championing policies such as Policy IHBEA, ADB, and Resolution on Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education, and working to remove barriers and provide equitable opportunities for all students. According to Superintendent Dr. Anna Cole, Kenny has capped off a long career in education with service to the Board of Education. His years of board service were extremely dynamic. Kenny led by continuously centering the needs of emerging bilingual students and the families and staff who support them. He has been instrumental in strengthening policy and practice in culturally and linguistically diverse education and diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. We will miss his leadership, partnership, and collaboration on the board and in all the committees Kenny supported. We will also miss his humor, warmth, and faith in the promise of high-quality education for transforming the lives of children, families, and communities. And whereas Kenny has done this work for decades tirelessly and passionately to the benefit of students, Board President Jasmine Ramirez shared, "Mr. Kenny has been a champion for students, families, and staff over the past 4 years, and his work to push the district to be more equitable and student-focused will continue to be appreciated for years to come." Board Director Catherine Kuhlenberg added, "Kenny has been an incredible asset to the district on so many levels, from classrooms to boardrooms. Serving with him has been a privilege and I will deeply miss him. His drive, unwavering commitment to students, and his ability to push for accountability respectfully and vigorously. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Roaring Fork School District Board of Education expresses its profound appreciation and gratitude to Kenny Tytler for his distinguished service as an educator, mentor, and board director, and for his enduring contributions to educational equity and excellence across the Roaring Fork Valley."
That's nice. Thank you. That was nice. Thank you.
Very team.
Thank you.
The next business in order is the board updates and appreciations, and we will begin with Director Tytler.
Well, I would like to just say thank you for all the kind words. It means a lot. It's been honored to be able to serve on the board, and it feels like my education journey has been a little bit of a full circle, and so I appreciate it. And I specifically want to say thank you to the board for all of the work that you all put in, the way that we work together. It can be difficult at times. It can be hard. It's not an easy job. And so just, I appreciate your being there and support. And to the staff, I want to just say thank you I know I push hard sometimes. I appreciate you working with me. I appreciate your willingness to listen. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to serve. And Carla, I want to say thank you for letting me do this, but also Carla's dad was a superintendent. So she understands the difficulty of it and what it entails. And so she's kept her distance for her sanity and understanding how that works. But I appreciate your support of me doing this job, and I'll miss being here.
Meetings are open to the public. You.
I'll be signing up for my next public comment.
I don't have many reviews, or updates, sorry. So I want to take my time to thank the board, just reflecting on the meeting tonight, the work session previously, and conversations that I know board members were having in advance in preparation for discussions today. It strikes me that we are able, with the leadership of the staff and our chair, Director Ramirez, that we're able to pack an awful lot in to a single meeting, and any one of these items, whether it's JEB, the DAC, the enrollment numbers, and October count and the financial implications of that, CLDE resolution and honoring a valued and cherished board member, any one of those could take all night. And so it is remarkable to me how much we pack in. And so I'm grateful to you all for making us do the hard work. Thank you. Director Klumberg.
Sure. My update is that the election cycle is over. I'm very pleased that it is over, and also with the outcome. So I will be here for 4 more years and not saying goodbye like Kenny. And I wanted to give a couple notes of thanks. The first is to all of our community, our staff, everyone who is involved and engaged through this election cycle, all of the organizations that hosted forums. I think it's all critical. And I think that in reflecting on it, what's come forward in my own mind is the importance of engagement, and just seeing the increased engagement this cycle was really uplifting, and I think reaffirming for me in serving in this role, which isn't, as we all know, isn't always sunshine and rainbows. But we're all here to serve our community, and they showed up this election cycle and gave us the go ahead to continue and do it. So I'm thankful for that. I also wanted to give a shout out that I give, I think, every fall, and that is for the staff at Basalt Elementary who voluntarily go through conferences every fall with both teachers and the team, sitting down with every single student, because it is a dual language school. And so they have a staff member who speaks each language at every single conference voluntarily every fall. And I just think that it is an incredible testament to the devotion and the leadership in the building and the commitment to excellence and family engagement that has been cultivated there. And it's extra time out of their days. And so I'm very grateful for that as a parent and as a board member, because I know it's meaningful for a lot of families. So those are my 2.
Director DeFreitas.
Quick updates. You guys might have read all this in the superintendent update on Friday, but IBB met for the first time on October 30th. And so just wanted to let you all know that that process has been starting. 2 interests have been brought forward that'll get more attention once the committees have had time to wordsmith and make sure that they're focused the way that they want to. Staff did an excellent job accommodating what was sort of a challenging start because our facilitator ended up being sick and could not attend in person. And so they had to kind of make some last minute adjustments and keep everything moving forward when he was trying to help facilitate virtually. I do think one good takeaway was it started with all IBB participants in the room, so admin and classified and certified, and all of them got a walkthrough on the process. For some of the longtime serving certified members, teachers who've been in IBB for ages, this was all review, but it was helpful review. But for many of them, it was just a brand new introduction to the process. Not brand new because they'd done it last year, but it was a really good way to just sort of clarify it. Those slides have been shared. If you find yourself wondering what is IBB, how does this go, they were really helpful. So it's a good resource there. I just wanted to share that. Labor Management Committee has been going along with that, facilitating the agenda and making sure that we are doing close read studies of the contract, and making sure that leadership for RFCEA is understanding that document and making sure that we all recognize it'll be up for renewal before you know it. And so spending the time to make notes and work together and continue to hear teachers' concerns about implementation and staff as well. So that is all ongoing. I sent out a brief note about communications committee, trying to get it started, thinking about it in a quarterly manner, not monthly. I don't think that's necessary, but that is underway as well and more to come. Appreciation is actually for GSES, who did a camping out night last night, a practice camp out night under the Aurora Borealis. I heard it was absolutely incredible. Yeah, so the kids were learning to make fires and they were hiking in the dark and the sky was just blowing up. And you know that all the teachers stayed and did all that extra stuff as well. So appreciation for them. But what an incredible opportunity. I imagine that's going to be a core memory. So.
Do you? Yes, yeah. Just update, we had finance committee on Monday and, we went through finance today. So I think there's just a lot of conversation there to come in the coming months. And so I appreciate and will say forever how thankful I am that we have a finance committee. And then just an appreciation, some of our schools, I believe most of our schools had a Veterans Day celebration yesterday. And I just want to appreciate all of the schools who take the time to thank our veterans. I think it's incredibly important that our kids get to not only acknowledge the veterans in their communities, but also to be able to see what that looks like of civic service, recognizing our heroes. And I think it was really important for us to have assemblies like that for our students to participate and to give thanks and gratitude for veterans. So thank you to all of our schools. All right, team. If there is no further business and there's no objection, the meeting will be adjourned. It is 9:01 p.m. Thank you.